Target tank. Only a few years ago, the helicopter was perhaps the most fragile machine on or over the battlefield, contrasting with the heavily armored battle tank. Yet today, the men in the tanks have come to hate and fear the helicopter as enemy number one. Today's helicopters float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and they can sting right through the frontal armor of the heaviest tank. Of course, helicopters have been around since World War II, but it was not until the 1960s, during the long and bitter struggle for Vietnam, that helicopters really came of age. Typical operations over the flat terrain of the Mekong Delta were medevac missions, flown by the ubiquitous Huey helicopters of the U.S. Army. The Huey could take 6 litters plus a medic, who was often able to save lives during the short flight to the field hospital. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of troops and civilians owe their lives to being speedily and smoothly transferred from the remotest battleground to the nearest surgical unit. The Huey was the workhorse of Vietnam and was deployed by the thousand, outnumbering all other aircraft in the theater. Officially called the UH-1 and a product of Bell Helicopter Textron at Fort Worth, it was first flown in 1956. Like all good airplanes, it grew in power and capability, and most of the Hueys in Vietnam could carry up to 14 troops and an assortment of guns and rockets. They could fly at a steady 110 knots, or 127 miles per hour. And throughout the Vietnam War, the U.S. Army and other services used the Huey for just about everything, though their main role was as a troop carrier in the air cavalry. Like many helicopters, the Huey's big two-bladed main rotor creates a distinctive pulsating, thumping sound called rotor slap, which can be heard on the ground some time before the helicopter comes into view. Surprise was therefore out of the question, and it became standard practice to keep the enemy's head down by spraying the whole area with machine gun fire. One of the standard weapons was the 7.62 millimeter M60, which fired at a cyclic rate of 550 rounds per minute. It was fed by 100-round ammunition belts. The other standard weapon was the 2.75-inch rocket, fired from a 7-tube launcher. Used by the million in Vietnam, the 2.75-inch rocket had no guidance, but was stabilized by fins, which flick open to make it spin rapidly in flight. Even so, compared to the M60, it was not a precision weapon. It was fine for firing into suspected hideouts, for instance along the Mekong waterways. But if you tried to hit a specific target, such as a small boat, there might be 30 misses before one lucky hit. However, in support of riverline patrols, the guns and rockets of the Sea Wolves' Hueys prevented the enemy having free use of the waterway. Different weapons were fitted to the Hueys, such as the M60 in its infantry form, with a stock and pistol grip, but fed by the same 100-round belts. Vast quantities of 7.62mm rounds and 2.75-inch rockets were fired in Vietnam, in ground strafing missions very similar to those flown by fixed-wing aircraft during both World Wars. It was commonly said that the firepower of a rocket salvo was like a barrage from 38 howitzers or a broadside from a Navy cruiser. But it has to be remembered that the rocket is still an imprecise scattergun type of weapon. Putting guns and rockets on the Huey had made it obvious that a purpose-built armed helicopter could be an important weapon in its own right. Lockheed got the job, but produced a helicopter so complex and expensive that it never went into production. Neither did the Sikorsky proposal, the S-67. Meanwhile, the armed Hueys had to soldier on. However, back at Fort Worth, Texas, Bell quickly used company funds to put the Huey's engine and rotors onto a slim, fighter-like fuselage, seating a weapons operator in the nose with the pilot above and behind him. There was no cabin, and the Model 209, or AH-1 Huey Cobra, was devoted entirely to sensors and weapons. It was just what the Army needed, and soon hundreds were being rushed to Vietnam. Quickly assembled and checked out, some AH-1Gs were in action a day after arriving. Popularly called the Snake, the AH-1G was equipped with a powered chin turret fitted with various mixes of machine guns or 40mm grenade launchers. On each side, there was a stub wing carrying 4 pylons for forward-firing rockets, guns, or later, guided missiles. Straight away, the Cobras began escorting the Hueys. As they neared the landing zone, the slim Cobras would race on ahead and soften up the surrounding area. Usually, the wing pylons would carry rocket launchers, the maximum load being 4 launchers with 19 rocket tubes each, a total of 76 missiles. As well as the General Electric minigun in the chin turret, additional machine guns were carried on the stub wings. In order to shield the landing zone, a smoke screen could be laid down. The Hueys wouldn't hang about. Sometimes the troops would leave the helicopters without their even touching the ground. After the troop carriers had gone, the Cobras would stay to provide close support for the freshly inserted troops. Any pockets of enemy resistance would be reported to the ground commander, who could call up the Cobras and give them an exact target at which to fire. A rocket salvo with fragmentation warheads could be devastating, and a minigun could saw big trees in half. operating behind a thin canopy, though their seats and side panels were armored. Early AH-1Gs were limited in their ability to operate at night or in bad weather. But later Marine Corps AH-1Js not only had upgraded equipment, but also twin engines. The Marines lost 17 machines in 1967 due to engine problems, but the twin-pack engine enabled the Sea Cobra to return to base even with one power unit knocked out. The Sea Cobra's turret mounted a 3-barrel 20mm cannon, while the Army's AH-1G often appeared with an M35 subsystem, adding a forward-firing 6-barrel cannon with 1,000 rounds of ammunition. Later, General Electric produced a universal turret able to mount a 20 or a 30mm gun, giving great hitting power and range. The Vietnam War, therefore, saw the first introduction of dedicated ground attack helicopters. Their value was immeasurable, but they had not yet developed into modern tank busters. In Europe, in the 1950s, the French had pioneered the anti-tank helicopter, armed with batteries of crude missiles guided by signals sent out along fine wires trailed behind the weapon. One current French helicopter is the Gazelle, basically much smaller and more agile than a Huey or a Cobra, but just as versatile. The basic Gazelle is a 5-seater, but the French Army's dedicated anti-tank helicopter is the SA-342M version. Each machine can carry 6 forward-firing tubes, each containing a HOT missile. HOT is an acronym, meaning high subsonic speed, optically tracked, tube launch. HOT is a new generation precision missile that unfailingly knocks out any armored vehicle it hits. Though small, the 342M is equipped with a Deca-Doppler radar, Nadir navigation computer, autopilot, and night flying equipment. As an alternative to HOT missiles, Gazelle can carry 2 machine guns, or a cannon, or self-homing missiles for destroying other aircraft. In Italy, the Italian Army operates the Augusta A109A. Slightly larger than the Gazelle, it has 2 engines and can seat up to 8. The crew sit in conventional side-by-side position. The usual roof-mounted gyro-stabilized sight is the same as used by the Gazelle, and there is a fixed forward sight. The shapely fuselage and retractable landing gear make it one of the most streamlined helicopters ever built. One of its many weapon fits is the Belgian ETNA pod, each of which houses a 12.7mm heavy machine gun. One can be carried on each side of the aircraft and are effective against light armor. Fire support can also be provided by a 12.7mm gun pivoted in the cabin doorway. For area suppression, Launchers can be fitted for rockets of 50, 68, or 81 millimeter caliber, and this versatile machine can also carry many types of guided missiles. The 109 thus gives the Italian Army a neat anti-armor helicopter of great versatility. Back in 1961, Hughes Helicopters won a U.S. Army competition for a light observation helo with a machine of amazing compactness and agility. From this was developed today's McDonnell Douglas Defender, which can carry more weapons and fly more missions than most helicopters of twice its size. Some Defenders have a missile sight in the nose, but can also operate with a mast-mounted sight. This is the obvious place for the eyes of a battlefield helo because it enables the crew to target the enemy without exposing the helicopter. Only the small mast sight protrudes above the natural cover, yet this is sufficient to kill a tank weighing 40 times as much as the little helicopter. Defender's anti-tank missile is the Hughes TOW. TOW stands for Tube Launched, Optically Tracked, Wire Guided. The TOW sight system has been upgraded with lasers and thermal imagers for night and bad weather operations. For all-round cost and effectiveness, the Agile Defender is hard to beat. Here is a much more expensive twin-engine helicopter. The BO-105 is made by MBB in West Germany, and over 1,300 have been delivered. Of these, 212 are the PA-1 version of the West German Army, which are right up at the sharp end of NATO's defenses, many only 5 minutes from Soviet armor. The PA-1 crews fly really low and fast. They would have to in order to survive in wartime, and they get to know the local countryside and how to use it to their best advantage. The PA-1's target is armor. Each machine carries 6 HOT missiles, and they can hedge-hop their way to small forest clearings and lie in wait. The weapons operator has the familiar APX-397 roof-mounted sight of the Gazelle and A-109, and looking through this, he tries to acquire a target. The sight is stabilized and can magnify the image 10 times. Initial hot training is done on a simulator, but eventually the PA-1 crew have to go out and fire real missiles. Each has to be guided all the way to its target, the operator keeping the spot of light lined up with the target using an infrared wavelength. Tanks taking evasive action are much more difficult to hit, but they can't see the missile coming. The helicopter then moves to a fresh ambush position, and the target acquisition and engagement is repeated. When all 6 missiles are fired, the BO-105 returns to a forward operating location where support troops pump in fresh fuel and attach 6 new loaded hot tubes. The whole refueling and rearming takes only a minute or 2, the crew staying in the machine. The PA-1s are now ready for another mission. Britain's only battlefield helicopter is the Westland Lynx. This is an outstanding twin-engine machine which currently holds the world helicopter speed record at over 400 kilometers or 250 miles an hour. Built in naval as well as army versions, it can carry 8 hot, tow, or other anti-tank missiles, and has proved to be one of the steadiest firing platforms around. In contrast, it can loop, roll, and make other harsh maneuvers. The British Army fit a tow sight on the roof, with night and bad weather features. Lynx can fly backwards at 80 knots. It can then go 90 degrees nose down to accelerate forward, showing total pilot confidence. A roll is pure enjoyment, despite the fact the Lynx can carry 10 troops or a cargo load of 3,000 pounds. No helicopter anywhere can carry a greater assortment of armament, including forward-firing guns of up to 25mm caliber and many kinds of rockets, such as the hefty Sura rockets of 81mm caliber. Lynx can destroy other helicopters with Magic, Mistral, or Stinger missiles. Lynx's primary battlefield role remains tank killing with the tow missile and its sight, which is made under license by British Aerospace. The tows are carried in quadruple boxes, and one tow can pretty reliably be equated with one fewer enemy tank. But Lynx can do more than this. A 7-man squad can be inserted into an exact, predetermined spot keyed into the helicopter's digital navigation system. Each man carries 2 of the Milan infantry anti-tank missiles, which proved so effective in the Falklands. The Lynx can provide local protection, and in a few minutes can bring up reloads for the Milan launcher. They all add to the enemy's attrition, and when called for, the Lynx can move the team to a fresh location. Latest and most powerful member of the family is the Lynx III, which is bigger, heavier, and even more capable. One of its armament options is 16 Hellfire missiles. Made in the US, Hellfire is the biggest and deadliest anti-armor missile ever. The name is an acronym, meaning helicopter, launched, fire, and forget. No longer does the operator have to steer the missile to the target. Instead, Hellfire homes on laser light scattered back from the target, and it hits plumb center, while the helicopter can turn away and position for the next attack. Newest of the French tactical machines is the pretty Aerospatiale Panther, though no firm orders have yet been announced. Developed from a family of helicopters known as Dolphins, some of which are in service with the U.S. Coast Guard, the Panther is specially designed to survive in battlefield environments. It is made hard to detect on radar or by heat sensors, and the structure is even made to survive a severe crash. Like the similar Lynx, the Panther has twin engines, a roomy cabin, and can carry cannon or rocket pods, or 8 pod missiles. Like all battlefield helicopters, Panther is equipped with detectors and cutters to try to minimize the terrible danger of flying into electric cables, which in peacetime training are the biggest single hazard to the battlefield helicopter. Panther can also be fitted with infrared thermal sensors and low-light TV cameras. It can therefore fight by both day and night. So far, Europe has produced only one dedicated armed helicopter of the class pioneered by the Cobra. This is the Italian Augusta A129 Mangusta, or Mongoose. Powered by twin Rolls-Royce engines, the Mangusta is smaller than the Cobra and even more agile. It is a very elusive target, yet it is designed to survive hits by enemy fire of up to 23mm caliber. The Italians followed the American practice of putting the comprehensive day and night tow sight in the nose, but have now realized that to enable the helicopter to remain concealed, the sight ought to be on a mast above the rotor. Usually, the Mangusta carries quadruple tow launchers on its outer wing pylons, with rockets or gun pods on the inner pylons. Augusta and various partners are working on the next generation helicopters developed from the Mangusta, which is currently serving with the Italian Army. Now this looks like our old friend the Cobra. In fact, the AH-1S version is totally upgraded. It is armed with 8 tow anti-tank missiles. It can also carry, on the inner pylons, up to 38 rockets with any of 5 types of warhead. The chin turret houses a 20mm cannon firing 750 shots per minute, controlled by the gunner with the Cockpit telescopic sight unit, or by pilot or gunner using the helmet sighting system. As well as the tow sight, there is a laser ranger, head-up display, a projecting air data sensor for help in aiming rockets, Doppler navigation, and even an inbuilt laser tracker. The 1S is a very survivable helicopter. It has an infrared jammer to defeat enemy missiles. There are devices to suppress the heat radiated from the engine. There is a flat plate canopy to reduce sunlight reflection. Going into an attack, the cockpit head-up display indicates heading, exact height above the ground, engine power, and target range. The tow sight shows a white rectangle, which is the tow launch window, and the crew must get the target within this outline. The pilot could take evasive action so long as the target stays inside the window. If rockets are to be used, they are selected on a management control panel where the type of warhead chosen is indicated. Firing mode can be designated as single, pairs, or quad, and at 3 firing rates, fast, slow, or automatic. Quantity may be selected, and fuse timing or penetration may also be chosen. Setting of ranges up to 6,000 meters is possible. The Laser Ranger gives target range accurate to within 3.3 meters or 10 feet. The helicopter's speed affects the impact point, so the fire control system compensates for this. The aiming point can now be automatically adjusted to compensate for helicopter movement and the effect of wind. The helicopter is maneuvered until the two reticles on the display are superimposed, and a skilled operator can achieve this within 2 or 3 seconds. Here, the tow sight unit is giving a magnified image tracking a road vehicle and a helicopter, either of which could be hit. For a thick-skinned target, a tow would be used, while gunfire can be aimed by the integrated fire control system. Increased firepower and vastly improved electronics have added a mighty punch to the Cobra family. Besides the new machines, earlier models are being upgraded. The ultimate Cobra is the AH-1W Super Cobra. Much more than twice as powerful as the first version, the Super can carry 8 of the Hellfire missiles. Its 20mm cannon can engage a variety of ground targets, including armored personnel carriers. Infantry can aim laser designators at enemy armor, and the helicopter's Hellfire missile, homing on the reflected energy, is bound to score a bullseye. Hellfires can be launched at both low and medium altitude, and the helicopter can search for a new prey while the first missile is en route to its target. Up to 76 of the familiar 2.75-inch rockets can be ripple fired. For defense against other aircraft, it can even fire AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles. On the other side of the Atlantic, a cold night in Europe heralds a simulated enemy armored advance into West Germany. The enemy columns of tanks and personnel carriers are protected by air defense radars. Next morning, sleepy villages in the Fulda Gap, northeast of Frankfurt, become the scene of the first large-scale engagements between helicopters and armored formations, because they are in the direct path of aggression from the east. In fact, this is Exercise Reforger, when the performance of combined arms forces was closely scrutinized. These tactical exercises train the troops in the coordinated use of all the men and equipment available to the field commander. The umpires, identified by white flags, keep a careful watch. One of the chief participating units is the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division, which deployed from Fort Campbell to West Germany and immediately joined battle. One of its items of equipment is the TOW anti-tank missile system, mounted on the mechanical mule light all-terrain vehicle, complete with crew and reload supply. Another, of course, is the AH-1S Cobra TOW helicopter. These, together with the scouts and transports, will make up the exercise's helicopter assets. The Cobras move out under radio silence to take up positions in forward assembly areas. Here they will be parked and camouflaged until called upon to fight. A simple map of the region shows the aggressor forces in red punching down from the northeast. The American and West German defenders in blue comprise the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment on the right flank. On the left is the German 13th Panzer Brigade. The 101st anti-tank helicopters have the task of attacking the enemy head-on from the east and west flanks, while the heli-borne infantry will be used to execute air-mobile operations behind the forward edge of battle area. The role of the enemy is acted by U.S. and German tanks, armored personnel carriers, and self-propelled artillery. The job of the 101st will also be to plug any gaps in the defense that the enemy might exploit. Added realism is provided by Hawk surface-to-air missiles and complex communication systems. The defenders do not know the enemy's plans, and so send out Bell OH-58 Kiowa Scout helicopters. The Scout's mobility permits the ground commander to obtain accurate intelligence of the enemy's dispositions and movements, and they can cover a large area in a very short time. It is vital that the opposition does not know of the presence of friendly forces. The Scouts, which usually work in pairs when contact with the enemy is imminent, therefore advance in nap-of-the-earth flight. Finally, they establish visual contact with the enemy.
This is Bravo Tango 4-2. Enemy armor at November Bravo 185120.
The action now takes on a faster pace. Artillery fire is brought down on the advancing armor. Close air support is called up to help blunt the enemy's advance. The Cobra TOW helicopters are then brought forward from their holding area in preparation for the attack.
Kilo 6 Lima, this is Bravo 84. I have a mission. Go ahead, Bravo 84.
They are briefed by the Scout.
We have reports of 50 to 60 tanks in the area northeast
The
of Star
Cobras
North.
move forward, accompanied by other Scouts, which will precisely locate the enemy and find good ambush positions. Within minutes, The first Cobra is in an attacking position. Cautiously, it unmasks at maximum standoff range of over 2 miles. As the Cobra's sensors are in the nose, the whole helicopter must be exposed. The Cobra then moves on to another attack position. At 2 miles range, the helicopter is very difficult for the armor to spot, though any Warsaw-packed radars present would see it instantly. Hitting armor in the open is a relatively simple job, but when the enemy is not moving and is himself camouflaged in ambush with good observation and fields of fire, this presents the helicopters with a far greater problem. To help divert the enemy's attention, artillery and ground attack aircraft are frequently used in conjunction with a Cobra's attack. If the radio channel is jammed, the OH-58 crew can use visual symbols to tell the Cobras the exact position of the enemy. Other tow attacks can be made by the mule-mounted teams, who are brought in by Hueys. The mule teams are able to deploy from the landing zone to a nearby ambush position. The Hueys often wait near the landing zone to offer support or move them onto a fresh location. New tow teams can always be brought in to reinforce the ambush or to mount new attacks. All the time, the scout helos keep watch on the enemy's movement.
This is Yankee Tango 30 from registration point Delta, right 200 and 50.
When the Cobras come into a forward operating location, they can be refueled and armed in between 3 and 5 minutes. To avoid detection, the forward locations are frequently changed and always camouflaged. Once resupplied, the Cobras are off to fight again. When possible, the Huey transports concentrate beyond enemy artillery range, but they are always vulnerable to enemy air and missile strikes. If able to do so, they continue to bring in fresh troops and weapons, their element of speed and surprise trying to catch the enemy off balance. Raids can be mounted in company strength against command posts and supply dumps. Battalion-size raids may be used to cut the enemy's supply lines. Speed and surprise, though, is always essential. In this exercise, they flew much higher than normal to avoid the peril of wire strikes. In real war, they would keep right down at almost ground level. Every landing zone must be carefully selected for security and for approach routes which avoid the enemy's air defense missiles, radars, and anti-aircraft guns. The Cobras, Kiowas, and Hueys will have to survive over a battlefield covered with the enemy's radar-guided missiles like the Hawk. They will also have to contend with better radar-controlled guns than the Vulcan. Their job will be difficult. Next day, the Cobras are given the task of laying a smokescreen to mask a Huey landing zone, while others are busy dispensing mines in the path of the enemy. The reforger exercises are seen as vital training in anti-tank tactics, and though the U.S. Army is refurbishing many Cobras and Hueys, they are now acquiring new types of helicopters. Replacement for the Huey is the Sikorsky UH-60A Black Hawk. Bigger and more powerful than the Huey, it carries the same squad of 11 to 14 troops, but flies faster and has better protection with a radar warning receiver, infrared countermeasure set, and chaff and flare dispenser. An even bigger advance is that to make full use of the Black Hawk's lifting ability, it can be fitted with an external stores support system in the form of large strut-braced wings, which can be fitted in the field. Four big pylons on these wings can carry over 10,000 pounds of extra fuel, electronic countermeasures, almost every kind of weapon, and even motorcycles. Among the weapons that can be carried are guns, rockets, or tow or Hellfire missiles. Hellfire is especially valuable because it needs no sighting system in the helicopter, just a friendly laser to illuminate the enemy tank. Hellfire's main partner is, however, the mighty AH-64A Apache. Designed by Hughes, but built after the company was bought by McDonnell Douglas, this is the king of battlefield helicopters. Powered by two engines, each of 1,700 horsepower, the Apache is a dedicated two-seat tank killer. And for the first time, it is a machine designed from the start to work at night or in bad weather. huge, preying insect, the Apache lies in wait for hostile armor, knowing that with 16 Hellfires and complex sensors and sight systems, it can defeat all known tanks. The missiles can home on light from a ground laser or from its own laser designator. Under the fuselage is a powerful chain gun of 30mm caliber with 1,200 rounds, enough for 2 minutes continuous firing. Every round is able to penetrate an armored personnel carrier. For area attack, the Apache can salvo up to 76 rockets, and no helicopter can fire them with greater accuracy. Both crew members wear special helmets with the integrated helmet and display sighting system. A small monocle is positioned in front of one eye of each man, and though he can see through this clearly, it also feeds him with additional information. The pilot can read airspeed, height, and heading information, while the co-pilot gunner can see infrared pictures of the scene ahead, plus other information for operations at night or in bad weather. These helmets can also command the nose sensors and the gun. As the wearer's head moves, so do the sensors and the gun points where the crewman looks. Each crewman can access either the target acquisition and designation site or the pilot's night vision system. Both groups of sensors can also feed large displays in the cockpit. The Apache is expensive, so it has to do its job and get back to do it again. It is also powerful, is very agile, and from the drawing board, it was designed to withstand anti-aircraft fire of up to 23mm caliber. This is partly by the way it is built, partly by having armor, and partly by the concept of redundancy, in which if one part is shot out, there's always another part ready to take over. With inertial and Doppler systems, it always knows its exact position, and with auto-stabilization, it is easy to fly and a steady weapons platform. Nap of Earth flying, radar warning, chaff, flares, and an infrared countermeasures beacon all help Apache to avoid destruction. And even the vital bearings in the transmission drives are designed to run after all oil has been lost. With external tanks, it has such long range that it can self-ferry from the USA to Europe along this vital red line. Apache, whose target is tanks.